You're listening to HowStreet.com radio, available online at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. Welcome to HowStreet.com radio, the online source for market opinions. Here is Jim Goddard.
My guest is Mark Leibovit, editor and publisher of the Leibovit VR newsletters, also known as VRTrader.com. He's speaking to us from Arizona. Welcome back to the show, Mark.
Glad to be here, Jim.
Mark, Groundhog Day on Monday coming up. Is that an important date or time in the stock market?
Well, it's an important time in history, so I'm going to spend a little time talking about it since you brought it up. Groundhog Day isn't silly. The real story, it's ancient. And I'll give you a little bit of breakdown about it. So it's an astronomical hinge point, and it's February 2nd is almost exactly midway between the winter solstice on December 21st and the spring equinox on March 20th. So ancient cultures tended to mark these cross-quarter days because they signal a real change in daylight and, I guess, seasonal momentum. So long before groundhogs, farmers cared, priests cared, survival that really depended on it, has pagan roots. There's a term in the Celtic world called Imbolc, I-M-B-O-L-C. It was celebrated February 1st, 2nd, according to history, for over 2,000 years. So what's Imbolc mean? I-M-B-O-L-C. It means return of light, damming season, purification, early signs of spring. Fire light was honored. And this is the earliest ancestor. They called this thing called Bridget. It was the firelight goddess actually was honored. This is, I guess, the ancient. So Christianity ultimately absorbed Candlemas. Now, as Christianity spread, it didn't really use these dates. It rebranded them. So Candlemas, it's the feast of the presentation of Jesus. It's the blessing of candles, light returning, old Candlemas weather sayings. If Candlemas be fair and bright, winter will have another light, was the expression that was used. That's basically the groundhog rule. Clear day equals more winter. So there's also European animal prophecy traditions before groundhogs. Many people don't know this. They were badgers, hedgehogs, bears. Same idea. Animal comes out, sees a shadow, goes back to sleep, winter continues. So German immigrants brought this tradition to Pennsylvania and swapped the groundhog because it was local. They used the groundhog instead, okay? So it's a psychological timing, the winter breaking point by early February. Food stores were tight, people were restless, daylight noticeably increases. Humans needed hope. Rituals gave structure to anxiety. So Groundhog Day stuck because it adds humor, it adds ritual, adds a sense of controversy and control at the same time, and that's why it survived so many traditions when others didn't. So why does it keep resurfacing in history? Because every culture had the same problem. Are we going to survive until spring? Same date, same fears, same hope, different symbols. So February 2nd is Imbolc, I-M-B-O-L-C, Candlemas, Animal Prophecy Day, Groundhog Day, a recurrent cultural checkpoint. And to get back to your question originally, is it tied somehow to the markets? And the answer is yes, because you tend to see market volatility either side of February 2nd. And today was a classic example. If you were watching the stock market, it opened sort of flattish, and then within a few minutes had a huge sell-off. I mean, the Dow, I think, was down 500-600 points, and then starts rallying back slowly from that point. And, if you want to put your finger on what caused it, who knows? President Trump was doing a cabinet meeting, but I don't think anything dramatic was said there. But basically we went short actually this morning in our service because, this groundhog effect I keep writing about and talking about. I said there's going to be some volatility around this time frame. You know, it doesn't come exactly on February 2nd. Sometimes it comes a few days before, a few days after, but it may continue during this early February period. So there's some powerful forces at work here. It's just not the little groundhog sticking his nose out at Puxatawny Phil, they call him in Pennsylvania. There's different names for them in different locations. But I remember driving back from Vancouver in early February a few years ago, and suddenly out of the blue, the stock market crashed. I mean, I was driving, and suddenly the Dow's down 1,000, 1,500 points out of the blue. It might have been a few days after Groundhog Day, but this whole time period. So there's planetary forces, cultural forces, and all this stuff, mostly probably planetary forces at work here. So there's little to zero discussion about the time we just spent on this. If you look at the financial news, they're talking about what Apple computer shares are doing, what earnings are going to come out, or what Corning Glass did yesterday or the day before, or what NVIDIA is doing. And, of course, the big story today was, this is the classic one now that we're talking about volatility. Look at the gold market. I mean, we had, I'm going to say, was it almost a $400 or $500 collapse in gold today? Then it started to come back. I mean, it was up toward 5,600, and this is in U.S. dollars, of course, and it dropped down to about 5,100. This is a matter of minutes. Mr. Groundhog and the Groundhog effect certainly applicable here, so the same, probably tied to the same big sell-off we saw in the markets. Bitcoin was down too. So it'd be nice if this all happened exactly on February 2nd. I mean, that would probably build the strongest case for the Groundhog Day, February 2nd, that we're discussing. But this whole time frame is a time frame that you got to be on your toes, because the silver would go from 120. I have to check the numbers. It would have dropped to 106, 105 really fast this morning. That shook up a lot of people. So Puxatawny Phil in Pennsylvania, he's still in his cage, and they're not going to take him out till February 2nd. But they rattled the humans today more than the groundhogs. But it was an interesting day, and but the media is not discussing this at all, because they don't want to talk about anything except what's fed to them from their producers that's strictly financial related, or what's provided by companies or by the government, So that's why VR Trader is different.
Certainly is. Because we talk about stuff like this, and when people, and you have the numbers to prove it. That's what makes it different. It's not just talk.
Go back years and check these dates. You'll see it around this time. It's like talking about the vernal equinox coming up in March. We talked about this in the past. Not every March, but you talked about historically Julius Caesar and the Ides of March and all that stuff. Well, you look back at the COVID sell-off in 2020, it crashed right into the vernal equinox. I mean, to the day, to the minute. So nothing's 100%, but you got to be aware of these time frames and these events. It's like saying, you're not going to pay attention to sunrise or sunset, or where the lunar cycle is, or where the tides are, and that's going to change your life, or it's going to change someone's life if they don't pay attention to these things, both on a commercial and individual basis. So anyway, it's fun stuff, and I'm an observer of it and commentator on it over the years, and it's just not the common discussion. But the first thing I brought up as we started this conversation, Groundhog Day isn't silly; it's ancient, and that's really the key here.
Silver, having broken the $100 barrier, which was kind of mythical, kind of like the sound barrier was for aviators. Now that we've gone past that point, is there any stopping it?
Good question. When you went through the $50 level, that was the key event. I mean, for decades, from the 1980s all the way to 2011, the $50 was your barrier, and it gets up there and just collapses back. So this is like, I can compare this to a couple situations. You can talk about the Dow Industrials. For years, 1,000 in the Dow was the big barrier. I mean, I'm looking way back now, 1979, 1980, when I was first getting started in the market. I mean, 1,000 was like the roof, the ceiling. And when you finally broke through that in the early 80s, that's when things changed, and of course it's been marching higher ever since. Gold, we had a barrier around that $800 area and then up to 1,000, but mostly the 800 area from the big peak that we saw back in the 1980s. And then when it broke through that, it started more or less marching higher. Now silver had the $50 barrier, so to speak, and it broke through that. So I think it's really significant that it did break through that level, and there may be no stopping to how high is high. It's like saying, did anybody imagine the Dow at 1,000 in 1979 now being 50,000? Or the S&P 100 that time was around 100, and now it's 7,000. I mean, of course you're talking a few decades and a lifetime, but that's still huge, huge numbers. So where can silver go? Where can gold go? How high can the Dow go? That's all the same question. The Dow went up 50 times from the breakout level. 50 times for silver would put you at 2,500.
No.
Could it happen? Sure. I mean, could gold, gold went from $35 an ounce, over the decades now to 5,600. So again, these are, long-term numbers, and but many people invest long-term or plan for the long-term, and lifetime of savings is ultimately rewarded. So my feeling is, don't fight the trend. The trend is up. At some point, you're going to get a correction. Now, if you really, pushed me into the corner here and said, well, what kind of correction you can get? Well, I don't know if it'll happen or not, but the big breakout point in silver was 50. So I guess if they really want to shake it, they could shake it back to 50 or maybe 60 or close to that number, scare a lot of people, and then go up again. I mean, it could be, a technical correction to the breakout point, Gold did the same thing. I remember gold ran up to about 1,800, 2,000, and then it pulled back to that 1,000 level, which was the breakout point, and then it took off again from there. And this is a 10, 15-year comment I'm giving you right now. So, it's really been remarkable what happened, but there's also patterns in history, Jim, that say that these things can be nonstop, more or less, once key levels are taken out. I mean, nobody would have believed you when the Dow broke 1,000 that it would go to 50,000. No one at that time. And, you're happy if it went to 1,200 or 1,500. I'm saying. I mean, I could see the silver. Now that I'm playing with the numbers. Why not 2,500? Why not 5,000 in silver? Forget gold. I mean, if you just do the math and look at the potential multiplier effect, or based on how other markets have moved in recent history, nothing. You can't exclude any possibility. So what's the conclusion? Buy and hold, right?
We'll have more with Mark Leibovit right after this.
Don't miss out. Stay informed. Receive the HowStreet.com weekly recap with thought-provoking podcasts, radio, and articles delivered to your inbox. Sign up for the HowStreet.com weekly recap on our homepage at HowStreet.com.
Welcome back. We're speaking with Mark Leibovit. Mark, what's going on with copper?
It's going up too. it made continuing to make new highs. The copper stocks in particular, I trade. I like the stocks. Because I don't trade the futures, but a company like Freeport McMoran, which is actually, as you know, based here in Arizona, is a big copper name here in the U.S., even though they also have gold holdings through an acquisition they made many, many years ago. So, Freeport made a new high today. It exploded today, in fact. The stock was up almost 10 points today into a new all-time high. And it didn't, I guess it had a little bit of volatility during the day when the stock market had that early shake earlier in the session, but it came right back and started to rally again. So it opened up really strong, sold off, and then came back. So copper's on the move, but the metals, platinum is still a big catch-up play. I know you haven't asked about that, but it's still, in my opinion, very, very cheap. If you remember the days when platinum traded at a significant premium over gold. I'm trying to remember the numbers. If gold was $800, platinum was $2,000. I mean, there was a big difference in price. I'm going back a few decades. Well, platinum is in that mid-2,000 range now, and gold is $5,000. So by any logical extension, platinum should be trading at $10,000 or more now, and it's not. So that would be a catch-up play. Palladium, probably not as much, but copper, to answer your question, is strong. Apparently, you need a lot of copper wire for the data centers that Wall Street is so excited about, building all the power generation centers for AI. So they still need a bunch of copper there, though there is some talk about using some digital connecting cable or other, mechanisms to try to cut down the use of copper, but it's still part of just about everything that's built. So does that mean you go out and buy it today or trade it today? That's a whole other discussion. It's like buying nuclear. They have their shakeouts, they have their corrections, but I guess the bottom line, the trend is your friend. So the big name Cameco, which is Canadian, as you know. Of course, they own a part of that Westinghouse nuclear operation that manufactures the nuclear equipment. But that hit a new all-time high today, close to 134. I mean, the stock was $30 about a year ago. So, I've been doing this, as you know, for decades, and things, go up and up, and they get eventually into a parabolic swing, and they blow off, and then you get some huge correction. So you can't be Pollyannish about this, and that nothing comes down. What force of gravity ultimately comes into play at some point. So this is what you have to judge when you're investing or trading. When do you get in? When do you get out? Where's your mental stop? Do you just stick with it and don't care? For the gold bugs over the decades and the silver bugs over the decades, if you live long enough, it paid off, right? So depends on how long you live and how much patience you have.
Anything going on with Bitcoin?
Bitcoin is in the doghouse at the moment. It can't seem to get out of its own way. It's trading. It did trade in this 80 to 98,000 range. Now it's pushing back toward the high to mid 80s. Just going to have to watch the pattern. I'm long-term bullish on the cryptos. Whether Bitcoin is your best vehicle or not, time will tell. There are a lot of other cryptos out there, but if you're just an observer of the market, you've got this broad range of 80 to 100,000. And, of course, as you know, it made that record high of 126,000 late last year, sold off down to 80. It's had these huge periods of volatility that everybody knows about. So we have to watch it and just decide if you're trading it. So if you're trading it, you buy it when it gets close to 80 with a close stop, and if it gets back to 100, you sell it. And if it takes out either of those two ranges, we can decide whether that's a direction it's going to continue for a while. I think over time it could still and will likely still go up, particularly since the U.S. government, via Donald Trump's Bitcoin reserve and crypto reserve, and all the pending legislation out there is behind the crypto movement. But it might be, as I said, a 3-4 year process. So if we're talking in the year 2030, we may see Bitcoin at 200,000, but it might have gone back to 40 or 50 first. You know what I mean? So long-term bull, short-term, just watching for a confirmation of a bottom here. And it may not come until later this year, so we're just going to have to watch. But I'm still producing the blockchain letter, and we still keep a very core position in many of the cryptos on a long-term basis, because I still think that there's a story, just like there is for uranium and nuclear and gold and silver or whatever. The crypto market still has a bright future, and there's a lot of reasons for that besides just pure speculation. So we can talk about those another time.
Mark, anything else buzzing around inside that busy hat of yours?
Not much. We sort of covered it. I think we're okay here. I'll be watching the groundhog come out next week and enjoying the volatility in the market until then. And there's no super solar activity at the moment occurring today that I know of, that I might want to double check, our spaceweather.com. That'd be fun if we had a lot of CMEs today, coronal mass ejections, which is the problem. Let's see here. Well, there was a minor storm today. Let's see here. There apparently was a minor solar storm today, according to spaceweather.com. I'm just looking it up now as we talk. There were a lot of auroras that were seen in Norway. This is a headline that's on the screen right now. So there was some action today, but it wasn't one of these huge events where the sunspot was facing right toward the Earth, which I guess a big one facing right toward the Earth, which would mirror the Carrington event back in the mid-19th century. That hasn't happened yet. It will, though, at some point. And when that happens, boy, hell's going to break loose here on Earth, in terms of electronics and shortages and power outages and so forth. So, but no, just checking right now, a little activity, but not a major sunspot today. But thank you for mentioning it. I needed to check that anyway.
Well, I do notice personally when there's a lot of solar activity, my satellite TV services don't work very well.
And we also found out last week, I think we talked about this briefly, is when there's high solar activity, you're better off not being in an airplane because there was a study done, it was published just a few weeks ago, that communications on board the airplane were lost during a solar storm, and they couldn't track the plane, and the plane didn't know where it was for a short period of time. So the impact of these things, it's like saying, if before you get on a plane, you want to check to see if there's going to be a lot of solar activity, besides worrying what the weather is going to be like in your route along the way. So just something to think about. I wouldn't have connected the airplane connections to the solar activity until I read this article and the study that was done, and there was a serious incident. I think it happened over Canada, and I guess it doesn't happen every time, but it's something to be aware of. It's fascinating out there how we talk about, our own lives and what we have control of, and what we realize is very little we have control of,
Mark, thank you so much for chatting with us.
Anytime. Thank you.
My guest has been Mark Leibovit, editor and publisher of the Leibovit VR newsletters, also known as VRtrader.com. He was speaking to us from Arizona. If you have any questions for Mark or for any of our guests, you can send them to info@howstreet.com. We'll ask that question for you. You can find us on X @HowStreet. Our YouTube channel is Talk Digital Network. We're also on Facebook. I'm Jim Goddard. Thank you for listening.
Comments made on HowStreet.com radio are an expression of opinion only and should not be construed in any matter whatsoever as recommendations to buy or sell any financial instrument at any time. Available online at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. HowStreet.com radio is a production of HowStreet Media Incorporated.